A year ago, I've defended my PhD dissertation about military handbooks of Central European region printed in the 16th and 17th century. I've tried to see these military handbooks in as broad perspective as possible, but some minor topics wasn't possible to address in this way. So I'm really glad that this time I have the opportunity to speak of one of these minor topics, which in this case will be connected to military handbooks of early modern period, to military education of the time, and also to the military practice of the time. So let's start. As I've mentioned, I'll speak about military handbooks. We try to define what it actually is in the 16th and 17th century. I'll show you language structure of these books printed in Central Europe in the time under study. And then we will look at some Romance terms in German's military handbooks of the time and region, because especially French, Italian, Latin words appeared in these German books. And in the end, I'll try to explain this trend. Why did this happen? So what actually are military handbooks? While studying the genre, I tried to put together some definition because I was quite surprised there isn't any universally accepted definition of military handbook. Every author who studies this genre needs to make his own definition or characteristic. So this is what I came up with. I won't read it, just as you can see, the genre is still alive. There are still new military handbooks, and the genre is also very old. First books of this genre appeared already in the classical antiquity in Greek, in Rome, so the genre is a few thousand years old, actually. That's the reason we need to characterize the books, the military handbooks, more specifically for each period of time, because obviously the genre changed through the centuries. So if we look on European military handbooks of the 16th and 17th centuries, now I will read the characteristics. Those are educational publications dealing with military administration, military art, or military mathematics, fortress construction, or artillery. They focus on the warfare in general or on the warfare of particular type of troops, which is infantry, cavalry, artillery, or navy. They are general volumes with international validity. That's actually quite important. They were not obligatory for the military commanders of the time. They were just recommendations. So this is the time before the binding obligatory regulations of the 18th century. In the 16th and 17th, those were just recommendations. No one needed to really follow those books. So they helped to understand how to deal with some general and specific problems of the military and warfare of the time. To show you some history of the genre in the 16th and 17th century, I would like just to mention that those books were printed since the 1520s. They were printed usually in vernacular languages. Just a few of them were in Latin. Already on this, we can see that they were meant not for scholars, but especially for professionals, officers, etc. Since the 1550s, there came more and more books of the genre, and there was a certain boom of the genre in 1590s, so at the eve of the 17th century. In the 17th century, most military handbooks have focused on military architecture or military art. Those were books on how to train your soldiers, what are the best tactics and strategies. Numbers of the books were still growing up until the beginning of the 30 Years' War, when obviously due to some economic problems and also due to the fact that most young men learned how to wage a war right on the battlefields and not from books. So in the time of the 30 Years' War, the production of the genre actually declined. After the war, it started to grow again. And there was also another change in the genre in the time. Until the end of the 30 Years' War, most of the books were signed by their author because those were beautiful volumes, usually folio format, so large format, with many artistic illustrations. So the author wanted to take credit for making these books. But after the war, they changed to just small of really pocket books used for officers on battlefield or on some training grounds. So these books were usually anonymous. Now I would like to show you the structure of languages of Central European military handbooks printed between 1550 and 1650. So this was actually in my dissertation. I've identified 227 editions in the region of Central Europe. As you can see, most of them were in German, which makes sense because quite a big part of this region is German-speaking area, and where Germany was a birthplace of book printing. So obviously more than 3/4 of the whole number were printed in German language. There were 19 in French, 12 in Latin, and the other languages, I hope you can see it. There is still less and less books. As you can see, only one was in Czech. Now I'll say a little about these language groups, just shortly before we move to the French. Books in Polish, there were 5 of them, all published in the Polish Kingdom or Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, usually by Polish authors, meant for Polish readers. Those weren't typical representatives of the genre, no books about administration or military art. They were more about a proper way of waging war, so it seems they were more meant for Polish noblemen, Polish scholars, Polish kings and their sons to learn about the warfare philosophically, about warfare in general. About books in Czech, as I mentioned, there is only one edition in this whole century. It was published in Prague in 1618, shortly after the beginning of the 30 Years' War. It isn't original Czech book. It was first published in 1593 in German, book by Lazarus von Schweide, quite famous German general. And then in 1618 translated to Czech and published here. And that's all. There was no other Czech book. The reason is probably that Czech readers, usually noblemen or bourgeois, so more educated people with financial means, they usually spoke German, so they actually didn't need books in Czech. And the import of the books from German printing shops and book fairs was sufficient. There were some books in Latin, 12 completely in Latin, 2 others were partially in Latin, printed in various regions of Central Europe, and again, no typical representatives of the genre. Similar applies for Italian, 6 editions from various regions of Central Europe, most of them by Italian authors, but those were military treatises, so kinds of medieval types of the genre, books on military mathematics, again, not very usual types of military handbooks of the time. What was more usual types, what were more usual types are books printed in Central Europe in French. There were 19 editions of this kind, published especially in the Holy Roman Empire, especially in one of the biggest centers of book printing of the time in Frankfurt am Main. Books were mostly on military art and fortification construction, and most of them was published as well in German. So the author usually ordered translation of his German work to French and published it in both languages because he was aware that in the Holy Roman Empire there are people interested in his books, and some of them don't speak German, they prefer French, so he let it publish even for them, or for import to France, of course. And what's quite interesting is that there were also bilingual military handbooks in French and in German. There were 5 editions. One of them was a book originally in Italian language, so translated to German and French as well. It was a cavalry manual of Ludovico Melzi. And probably more important and more interesting is famous infantry drill manual. You can see a title page of it, a Waffenhandlung by Jacob de Geyn, originally in Dutch. Published in 1609. 2 editions published by de Geyn's name, the third one by the name of a younger editor. So French was actually the second language after the German concerning the military handbooks in Central Europe. I've tried to look to several German military handbooks of the time, and I was looking for terms in Latin, French, or Italian. And I could see that often you can identify them very easily because they're not printed in Fraktur, but in humanist scripts, Antiqua, etc. The Latin words are mostly common. Those appear in introductions, usually common words known by educated people: theologia, saeculum, exercitium, fundamentum. Interesting is that the verbs are usually shaped like German, präsentieren, so ich präsentiere, du präsentierst, er präsentiert, etc. Demonstrieren, it's the same. Languages like French or Italian, they appear mostly in military terms. So company, parade, salve, Leutnant, general, or military verbs, kommandieren, battalion, which means, well, making battle to happen. Sometimes also common words, but not so often: occasion, examen, commodity. Italian wasn't so, didn't appear so often. It was sometimes in military terms as well, like generalissimo, meaning the highest general of the army. So those are examples from one of the most famous books of the period, Kriegskunst zu Fuß, so military art of infantry, written by Johann Jakob von Wallhausen in 1615. I've also looked to the bilingual edition of Jakob de Gaines' Waffenhandlung, and I looked into the German text if there are also some French terms in them, and they actually are. On the picture on the right side, you can see the sentence on the top of the picture, marschiert, which is from French, und tragt bei forket, which is from Italian, neben der Musket, which is again from French. So most of the words actually aren't from German, but from some Romance languages. But those words didn't have any synonyms in German. They just, in this time, got to the German language and make the vocabulary of the language later. For a moment, I left printed sources and looked into the manuscript ones. This is actually, again, a kind of rewriting of the Gaines manual in own words of the scriber. There are, again, military terms like captain, Kapitän, marsieren, and some common words like observation, terminus, manier, etc. So in the manuscript books appear basically the same types of words as in the printed ones. Why did this happen? When we look into the curriculum, into some publications which presented military school, which was founded in 1617 in Germany. It was the first military academy in Europe in the modern history. We can learn that students of the school, which were 17 to 25 years old usually, learned several subjects like about military campaigns, about battles, camps, fortifications, etc. They have also some side subjects, usually sports like fencing, games with balls, etc. But they also needed to learn 4 lessons a week French language. The author of the pamphlet, which is again Johann Jakob von Wallhausen, I've already mentioned, one of the famous military theoreticians of the time, he tries to explain this because French language is, according to him, very necessary in military praxis because there are a lot of French people in German armies, and also, well, as we could see, there is a lot of French military terms in period military praxis. So to be able to become a good officer, you actually need to know at least some basics of French language. And quite interesting in this respect is also the fact that third director of the academy, of military academy, wasn't any military theoretician nor practitioner. He was actually French teacher. He didn't have anything in common with period warfare, but he taught French for several decades. And in 1608, he actually published French textbook, and he became director of military academy in Germany. So what were the reasons for need of French and of the French language in imperial armies? I've already mentioned most of the facts. In the mercenary armies, it didn't matter where the soldier came from to the army. When the regiment was put together in Germany, there were German soldiers, but French, Italian, Dutch, Hungarians, Czechs, whoever. And French people were quite common there. So it was good if the officer knew French language to be able to speak with them. There were a lot of French words in the military praxis, and also there was quite big interest in French warfare in Germany, as we can see on a lot of books which were translated from from French to German and published in Germany to educate people interested there in the warfare or of other regions, especially of the French region. One of the examples is Militia Gallica. The title is obvious. Which was published again by Johann Jakob von Wallhausen. So I'm getting to the end of my presentation. So what we learned, German was the main language for many European armies, not only those in German language area, but also for many which were outside of it. For example, in Poland, there were whole armies which were put together in Germany. I just came to Poland and fought in Polish service, for example. Romance words, especially the French ones, were used both in theoretical books and in praxis. The officers just needed the French words to be able to let their soldiers fight, because the orders were partially put in French. Some Romance words were used, although they had synonyms, which are the common words. Some became German vocabulary, as I've shown you. Those were the military terms. The significance of the French in period military praxis is confirmed by the text promoting Siegen Military Academy. So thank you for your attention.